Welcome all. We'll just start in 30 seconds to allow everyone to get in the room. Perfect. Hello and welcome to MIOSH webinars. My name is Maddie and I'm the Senior Consultant for MIOSH. Today's webinar is Adapting Wellbeing Programs Across Differing Environments, presented by Greg Stark. Greg is the founder and director of Better Being. His background in optimizing elite athlete performance merges competitive drive with exercise science, making him the go-to coach for busy executives looking to achieve balance and well-being. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. The chat is disabled, so if you do have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, we'll be monitoring the Q&A section, which is down below. Today's session is being recorded and will be sent to all registered attendees later today as well. So please enjoy, and over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Maddie, and hello everyone once again. Thank you for joining us for today's session. I thought I would start off with a bit of a story about my honeymoon. Strangely enough, you're probably thinking, what does your honeymoon have to do with health and well-being across different contexts? But when we went on honeymoon, we went to Tanzania, my wife and I, and we decided to be adventurous and go for a bit of a hike through the mountains. We weren't that adventurous where we went up Mount Kilimanjaro. We went up one of the smaller mountains, but we came across this young man as our tour guide called Henry, there in the white shirt holding the water bottle. Henry was a young man full of energy and enthusiasm and a real passion for life. And as we got chatting with Henry, discovered that we both shared the same passion for football, and tragically both supported Manchester United. So during the walk, we obviously spoke in depth about football. And at the end of the walk, he then invited me to come and join his mates who were having a training session that afternoon. So we went along to where they trained. And I've played on a few cow paddocks over the years playing football myself, but this was literally a cow paddock. There was a cow that would chase us around the field as we were warming up. Cow dung all throughout the oval, and every time I touched the ball, all I could hear was Mzungo, Mzungo, which means white man. But it was an amazing experience and felt so inclusive, and amazing to connect with people through sport and do it in that context. At the end of that training session, Henry then said to my wife and I, would we like to come and visit where he lives? And so he took us to his house. Being very honoured to be allowed to come and see where he lived. And when he spoke about his house, it was nothing more than probably a mud hut, corrugated iron roof. He shared it with his mum, his sister, his niece. His father passed away when he was young, quite tragically. But with great pride in his house, he took us through what was the kitchen, essentially a little fire pit, and he showed us his bedroom, which was a section of the mud hut. But interestingly, what I noticed in Henry's bedroom was this big poster of a white masonette house. Beautiful Corvette car parked in the driveway, sort of the typical American dream in that sense. So I asked Henry, what is that poster all about? And his face just lit up with pride and excitement to tell me all about the fact that that was the house that he was going to build for his mother. And he ran outside and he showed us the big pile of bricks that he'd been saving up through years of hosting people. He showed us the layout of where the house was going to be and exactly how he was going to build it. And then as we wrapped up there, he then offered to walk us back to our hotel room. And I remember like it was yesterday. And at that point, he turned around to me and he said, "This is my life. It is simple, but I am happy." And I think so often we get so caught up in our own lives that about wanting to get more and do more, that we forget about those simple things that make us happy. But I think the other lesson that I took out of that experience as well is that happiness can be in many forms across many different contexts. So I guess the purpose of today is to talk about how can we create a happy and healthy workplace regardless of the context, and really pay attention to where we can meet people where they're at when it comes to building a happy and healthy workforce. We know that right now, and I think it's this mental health pressure is beyond a tipping point. It's really bubbling over the edges between, the financial pressures that are going on, the issues going on globally with conflicts happening all around the world, to changes in work environment where people are working hybrid or coming into the office, the increases in social disconnection. We know that the environment is not a great place when it comes to our health and vitality, and we know that the workplace plays an essential role in this, which is why we're having a lot of these conversations with lots of different organizations at the moment. I love to make these sessions as interactive as possible, and I would love for you to join in the comment section is not available, in the Q&A section, and I would love to hear from you. What is the greatest challenges that you're facing right now when it comes to workplace wellbeing? Share those in the comment section so I can really talk to those challenges today and maybe share some examples of work that we're doing with clients that have helped to solve those challenges. If you can put that in the Q&A section, and I'll throw to Maddie in a second to get that feedback. But again, throughout the course of today, if you have any questions, jump in there. Would love to hear from you and your side of the screen. While they're coming through, I guess a bit of background about myself. Maddie mentioned I started my career working with elite athletes in sports and exercise science, then saw the opportunity to take those same principles of high performance from what we do with athletes into the corporate world, and began working with executives. Those executives started to feel great when it came to their health and well-being and how they performed in the workplace. They wanted the same for their teams. And so we came in and we started delivering programs for their teams. But one of the things that we noticed very early on is that the people that engaged with those programs were usually the people that were doing all the right things already. They were the ones that were eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep, managing their stress. The people that we really needed to help were the ones still stuck at their desk. They're not sleeping, they're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, not eating well, not getting enough movement. They were the people that we really wanted to help. So that's where we really dove a lot deeper into this corporate wellness area. We've been doing it for coming up to almost 15 years in terms of how do we support organizations in helping people to change their behaviors when it comes to health and well-being. And so as a business, our whole mission statement is how do we create a happier and healthier, not just work, but life outside of work. And we know that those two are so interconnected that often what's happening in our personal lives really influences our work, and what happens in our work life really influences our personal life. Maddie, what do we have coming through from people as the challenges?
Yes, so we have lack of respect towards staff from senior management.
Yeah, perfect. So I think that's not perfect, but again, it's one that we hear quite often, the disconnect. And, I presented with Mayush last month around the pressures on senior leadership, how senior leaders know that wellbeing is important, but there's a disconnect in them doing anything proactively to support their teams when it comes to supporting individuals' wellbeing. So hopefully we can talk to that a little bit in terms of some strategies that we can use to address those things today. Anything else coming through, Maddie?
Yes, so how do you change the work environment to create a supportive environment for all instead of changing individuals' behaviours when it is the workplace creating the issues?
Yeah, and again, I'm going to talk about this in a second, that there's always work design factors that influence well-being, and then there's individual behaviours that can also influence well-being. And so it's really important that we don't get caught up in putting all the blame on the employees and saying the employees need to manage their stress and to be healthier and focus on that, but actually looking at also what are those work design factors that we can improve upon and change within the workplace that can create an overall healthier and happier workspace. Any other ones?
Yes, last one. So working from home. I've been working from home since early in the COVID phenomenon, but now there are moves to make everyone come back in and work from the office. I've worked very successfully from home for a couple of years, and now they want me to have the stress and cost of commuting for no visible gain.
Yeah, again, I think a lot of businesses are struggling with this at the moment. I mean, COVID was amazing in terms of proving the fact that people can work remotely and be really productive in the way that they work. But actually, a lot of the research is showing that it actually isn't necessarily improving health outcomes for individuals, that people are actually working longer hours rather than working shorter hours because they feel that there's almost a need to compensate. And that's not to say that there's a lot of people that this is working for by having this remote working option. But the other thing that's becoming very apparent is a real lack of social connection and in the health and well-being of people. We know that it's important for a business in terms of having connection and purpose to the business itself, but more importantly, at an individual level, it's really impacting people's health and well-being. We're seeing this loneliness epidemic, and having remote workforces where people don't leave the comfort of their house and actually physically connect in the same space as other people is creating a whole raft of physical and mental health challenges for people going forward. So again, I can sympathize with your personal circumstance, but a lot of these decisions by workplaces aren't just doing things reactively and saying we need to make sure that everyone's in the office so that they're working well. There is a lot of research behind why people are making these changes as organizations. And I think people are still just trying to find what that sweet spot is as a framework, and every organization's different, but what is that sweet spot so that people can be happy, healthy, and productive within the workplace? Thanks, Manny.
No worries.
So some of the other research that's coming out, this research was from Deloitte in June this year. Right now, wellbeing is the #1 priority for 84% of people. It is more important than career progression for people right now. I think career progressions is about 74%. And as someone mentioned earlier, that a lot of the obstacles that this group of people are facing is centered around work. That heavy workload, stressful jobs, long work hours top the list of obstacles people are saying that are getting in the way of their well-being. So I think, again, everyone's sort of trying to discover what is my best operating rhythm. But I guess for the purpose of today, we want to talk more about how do we help support people, knowing that it is their #1 priority right now. How do we support them in improving their well-beings from a work design and human factor perspective? The research went on to talk about there being 3 keys to unlocking workforce wellbeing. So empower managers to support the workforce wellbeing. I think, again, we've already mentioned that early. Wellbeing is very much influenced by managers. Managers have a lot on their plate. A lot of them themselves struggle with their own well-being and then are expected to support the well-being of others. So again, really looking at how can we best support those managers to provide solutions that support others. Hold the executives and the organization accountable. A big part of accountability and things that we come across a lot of the time when it comes to wellbeing, people just want to tick a box. They just want to say, yep, we do wellbeing, we offer a fruit bowl, we do a workshop once a year, we do a wellness week. That those things are very tokenistic, that we need to be able to measure wellbeing on a regular basis to not only have awareness on the issues that face employees, but actually to see if interventions are having impact. And obviously there's a lot going on at the moment around psychosocial risk and psychosocial risk assessments. I imagine a lot of companies on here today have either completed that or are completing that at the moment. But again, it's great to see that we are holding businesses more accountable to the wellbeing outcomes within the organizations. And then embrace the broader movement towards human sustainability. So again, the importance of helping doing things not only at a work design level, but at a human level, and moving towards, the priority of helping people to be happier and healthier within the workplace and at home long-term, not just quick fix Band-Aid solutions. And how do we go about that? So as we spoke about before, this is our approach and philosophy when it comes to workplace wellbeing. There's 3 core factors that really influence an individual's wellbeing. So first of all, you've obviously got your policy. So again, what are the rules and regulations? Some of that's safety-based, some of that's compliance with legislation. Some of it is just your own policies around best practice and ways of working internally for your business. But again, what are the rules and regulations that's there to help people keep people safe, but also healthy and happy? We then also have the environment. Now, when we're talking about environment, we're not just talking about the physical environment, but also the online environment and the social environment. How are we creating environments where it helps people to be happy and healthy? Do we have ways of making sure that emails aren't being sent at 11 o'clock at night, which is interrupting with people's life outside of work? Again, what are the policies around a lot of those type of things, so that people can have that separation between work and life? And again, look, there's always lots of variables to that, but I guess the principle of creating the best environment and policies that are conducive to well-being and identifying those hazards. The last component there is the individual behaviours of the employees. So we look at those as human factors. So policy, environment, obviously are work design factors. The behaviours of your employee are human factors. And when we look at those, we look at how can we influence those behaviours across our 4 pillars of performance. We know that if we get people focusing on those 4 pillars, being mindset, movement, nutrition, recovery, that they can turn up as their best self to deal with the rigours within a workplace environment. Now, in saying that, someone can be doing all the best practice in terms of behaviors. They can be sleeping well, eating well, moving well, but they're coming into quite a toxic workplace because their manager is bullying them or a staff member is bullying them. It doesn't matter how good those behaviors, that unless we improve that environment for that person to be in, the wellbeing outcomes are still going to be poor for that individual and that team, more importantly as well. And conversely, we could have the best laid out work environment, the best practice in terms of policy, but if someone's staying up, until 2 a.m. in the morning because they're on TikTok watching the latest TikTok trends and only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep and coming into the work, doesn't matter how good those work design factors, their risk of injury is still double, due purely to the fact that they're not getting enough sleep. So we need to really highlight these challenges at an individual level, but more importantly, give people the tools and resources and accountability to start creating change in that space as well. Again, if you have any questions around that or examples, please throw those in the Q&A section. We'd love to hear from you. So again, a bit of a case study and example of where we've implemented a really great wellbeing program. And then I'm going to talk more about how we adapted that across the different environments at the time. So with the sudden onset of COVID-19, which almost feels like a lifetime ago now, Coca-Cola, CCEP, engaged us because they wanted to help people navigate the physical and mental challenges over what was quite a challenging time for them. So when we set out to design a program for them, I guess traditional thinking, what you would usually do is, and again, this might be already in place within your organization, but often you would send a questionnaire out, an employee engagement survey or a pulse survey that might get done once a year, maybe twice a year, or best case scenario 3 times a year. You would get your employees to complete that questionnaire. You will then get all the feedback from that, and it would take 3 months to interpret that data, identify the challenges and issues across different segments of the business. And then it might be another 3 months down the line where you engage providers and create a bit of a plan in terms of internal and external providers to come in, get all the costings up, and then have to present that to the senior exec team. So you're another 6 months down the line. And then by the time you get all the approvals and then you start to implement the program, you're another 3 months down the line. So by that stage, you're asking questions for a point in time, and then you're 9 months down the line, and that environment can be vastly different in that 9 months time, and then wonder why those actions and those steps that you've put in place, aren't resonating and aren't connecting with people. But that's typically how a lot of companies approach wellbeing. And this quote, the Henry Ford quote, is that often if we ask people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. Obviously, Henry Ford was the inventor of the car. So again, what Henry Ford did is that he knew that people needed to get from A to B as quickly and as reliably as possible. So rather than looking at creating faster horses, he invented what is now known as the automobile, the car, as a way to get people from A to B much quicker. Same can be said across wellbeing. Sometimes people don't know exactly what it is they need or what they want. Some people might say, I want a discounted gym membership. I want a fruit bowl. I want to be able to have extra funds to have runners. All those things might be great ideas, but they're not what is going to create a meaningful and impactful long-term change within the organization. And I think one of the key mentalities that we have is give people what they need, package it how they want to see it and how they engage with it. So the way that we like to approach our programs, and again, I've spoken previously about our PERMA Plus model in terms of positive emotion, engagement, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment, that we always keep that in mind when we're designing the program. A step that we do before we actually design the program itself is that we go through human-centered design. And I guess the key parts to human-centered design is obviously, first of all, we want to be able to define the people that we're wanting to speak to. What is their scenario? Who are they? How old are they? What gender? What's their occupation? Once we've identified who these people are, we then move into empathize. So what are these people, what are they feeling at the moment? What is their pain points? What is their beliefs? What are their goals? And let's start to create a list. And again, it's not going to be the same for everyone, and different contexts are going to be slightly different, but really thinking about who are the people we're trying to target with this initiative? What are their pain points? What are they feeling and thinking? And then from there, think about what sort of prototype can we create from that. And that's not just talking about what sort of fancy technology do we need to bring in. It can be about, training and development and how we deliver that training and development, and really thinking about how do they consume information. Again, what is their routine and ritual like where they can consume information in a meaningful and impactful way. And then we start to implement that program once the prototype's built out. And what's really important is to evaluate it as we go. So rather than waiting 12 months for another engagement survey to say, hey, were we successful? Did this work? But doing it in real time. Are we looking at numbers around how engaged are people in these different activities that we're running and ways to educate them? Are we evaluating the change in behavior over time? Are we evaluating areas of strength compared to areas of opportunity of where we can improve the program? And being able to do that as close to real time as possible is really important. So we implemented what we call our complete program with CCEP using this human-centered design and PERMA Plus model in the prototype to deliver a 12-month program where every month we had a different focus on health and wellbeing, and we communicated it in a way that really enforced positive psychology models and ways to engage people across different aspects of health and wellbeing throughout the year. And within 6 months, CCEP did an engagement score survey of their own, and what they found in that time period, the workforce engagement rating went up to 93%. The increase to that level was attributed to the work that they were doing in this wellbeing space. And again, I've spoken previously, wellbeing programs, you get a far greater return on investment, getting a return on investment of $5.81 compared to $2.21 when it's just safety. But when we do wellbeing, and the reasons for that being is it decreases workers' comp claims by 40%, but more importantly, increases productivity by 200%, and you are 4 times more likely to retain staff when you have an effective wellbeing program. And all those stats lead to better employment engagement. So we saw that internally within CCEP within Australia. This result was so remarkable that globally it got flagged as something they'd never seen before, and they presented at the European conference around the work that we're doing in that space. So we could have quite easily gone, perfect, how good are we? This is amazing, just keep doing the same thing. But as much as it pains me, particularly with the Rugby World Cup going on at the moment, and the All Blacks looking very strong contenders for the title, When you're at the top of your game, that is when you need to innovate the most. And so the All Blacks have this mantra and mentality that you go for the gap when you're top of your game. And so if we relate that back to, I guess, the CCEP program, when we looked a bit deeper into a lot of the engagement stuff and the areas of the business where we were getting really good traction, we identified that within that, the supply chain people weren't engaging with the material as well as the people that were in head office. And when we applied that design, human design thinking to it, it became very clear as to why that was. So we applied this process, as I said, in terms of the design process thinking. So when we started to define who the head office were, again, it was a mixture of genders, typically between 30 to 50. Obviously, there's always outliers. Again, they're in front of their computers all day long, very technology savvy, flexible work schedules to a degree in terms of when they can, consume information, and a bit of their workload peak was around end of financial year. If we compare that to supply chain were typically males that were a little bit older in that 40 to 60 bracket. A lot of them didn't even know their own email address, let alone how to log in for a webinar that we could have been hosting. Their work schedules are very rigid. They have to be on the floor at certain times in order to keep everything running, that we couldn't take them off the floor for an hour just to talk and discuss about wellbeing. And we know that their workload peaks were around end of calendar year. It was their busiest time of year. Then empathize. So again, if we started to look at those individual challenges across those different environments, so those within head office were feeling stress, and both head office and supply chain were both feeling stress. Head office was more around workload and volume of workload, where supply chain, their stress was coming from a lack of control over, again, very monotonous, repetitive work can actually cause stress, and again, not being able to change and control that. And again, so a way that we would talk and address stress would be very different across those two environments. Head office had quite a regular working pattern, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 type of thing, where the supply chain, their sleep were on shifts, either early shifts or late shifts, and that could change, and it was a lot more variable. So again, the challenges with sleep was a lot more around shift work. The challenges around head office was about how do we, mentally switch off and get that quality and quantity of sleep. If we look at nutrition, food choice, again, having access to a lot of food options. The head office compared to food accessibility, those sites are a lot more remote. A lot of people had to bring in their own food. So again, how do we educate around making food choices in social settings compared to how do we make food choices and food preparation at home to come in? If we looked at it from a exercise perspective, exercise is important to both groups. Head office, their biggest challenge when it comes to exercise is the amount of time that they spend sedentary, which obviously leads to a lot of diseases when we have high amounts of sedentary time. Again, the people that were in the operations field base, they're a lot more active. And so again, it's a lot more about how do we manage movement and exercise in order to limit injury risk. And a couple of other individual differences there. So then when we looked at all that, we then discussed what is the best way that we can communicate and address these people. So again, the typical way a lot of wellbeing programs work is let's run webinars, let's do e-learning courses, let's get written articles, and we can do on-site health consultations. And those things work really, really well, particularly at a head office level where people have that flexibility in their working schedule. But if we look at supply chain, we know that a lot of these people were spending times in trucks as well. So rather than webinars, let's put on podcasts. So we had pre-made podcasts that people could scan QR codes and access that podcast really quickly and listen to that same health and wellbeing topic as a podcast as they drive around in their truck. So again, having that connection to the information really accessible in that sense. We came in and delivered some toolbox talks as well, knowing that every morning there was an hour dedicated to doing a toolbox talk to talk about what was going on in the business. They would give us a 15-minute window of that toolbox talk to come in and deliver a different topic on different areas of health and wellbeing. And we've evolved that over time because what we also identified was that certain remote areas as well, we couldn't quite physically get to. So we started to create leader-led packs, which helped the operational site leader to deliver those sessions themselves, and not just give information, but what's really important with all these is stimulating conversations and starting conversations, particularly peer-to-peer. That's what helps to really change the culture within those different environments. And then the other aspect is infographics. So again, what we found is that people didn't have the time. A lot of them were illiterate in terms of being able to read really text-heavy research and documents. We needed to make information really accessible. So we created a lot of infographics. Some of those infographics were put up on screens within the workshop floor to talk and highlight different topics and promote certain healthy behaviors. And something else that we've recently started to do with a lot of clients is we've identified that, within those different workforces, we have a lot of different ethnicities. And one particular client comes to mind. They identified that they had 30% Vietnamese workers within their operations team. So now we're creating these resources in both languages. Again, makes people feel more included within the environment, but it meets people in the context of where they're at and makes them more likely to implement change by understanding the areas that impact them and the behaviors they need to improve on. And then last but not least is obviously the testing. So again, everything we do was look at how engaged people are. We have our Wellbeing Index, which I'll talk to in a little bit about what the Wellbeing Index does and how that works. Again, from the conversations that we had with site managers, we would get an understanding of how much people would like the content, the things they might be struggling with. Again, the way we delivered those on-site sessions were very conversational, so we could keep it really interactive. And they can be even down to little subtleties as well when it comes to webinars, in terms of whether we set them as a webinar for people to attend compared to a team meeting. We find that we get a lot more uptake and engagement. So constantly looking at those scores, and something that's been consistent throughout all the work that we've done. What works 12 months ago might not work today. So we've got to constantly innovate, think about how we can meet people where they're at. Again, we'd love to hear any questions in that section. Maddie, is there anything coming through in regards to those different contexts of working?
Yes, just a couple. So I don't understand how this helps an organization look at their culture and how it may be negatively impacting their workers, rather than implementing well-being activities to make workers feel better in the short term. So essentially band-aid effects rather than treating the symptom itself.
Yeah, and again, that's probably something I should have touched on. The work that we do, we specialize in the human factors, in how do we support the individuals. We don't specialize in the work design factors and those cultural factors that might be going on at the moment. We've got some great partners that we work with. I know FIFO do a lot of work with you guys as well. They're experts in that area. But what we like to do is, when we're working with those partners, is to get that insight and understanding of the context of the workplace environment, that if there is, cultural, problems within teams or businesses, again, how can we approach that from an individual level? I actually had a meeting today with a client where they were talking to me about one particular team within their business and whether our programs could help influence that. And the insight they gave is, what they know usually is that when there's those conflicts within businesses, and between employees, that often those individuals' well-being have something else going on, that's meaning that conflict is showing up in the workplace. So if we can help them at an individual level to get to a better place in terms of how they feel about themselves and how they feel about the world and how they feel because they're feeling healthy themselves and well, that we know that those outcomes within teams and peer-to-peer improve as well. So I guess there's twofold to that question. Firstly, definitely engage in experts across that work design aspect of wellbeing, but don't completely disregard at the individual level the impact you can have at an individual and how that can transform a workplace culture as well.
And we had one other. Sorry, we had one other on food choice and accessibility. So could you get the organization to look at their environment and find out why their workers are unable to bring healthy food to work?
Yeah, again, it's always a big part of what we do, is we want to understand those challenges that the individual faces. Again, if we're looking at that environment and individual aspects, we speak to clients all the time where they've taken out the unhealthy vending machines from the workplace, and it's almost started a riot. So again, what we want to do is not necessarily look at what we take away from people, but how can we encourage people to have better behaviors? And whether that's at an individual level, and again, the background working one-on-one with people, one of the first things that you get people to do is to make the healthy choice easy. That if the unhealthy choice is easy, we're gonna go for that more often than not. So if we can make those healthy choices by putting healthy vending machines on site, you can still have the junk food ones there, but make the healthy choice really good for people. And then more importantly, help to put a spotlight on how to interact with that environment, knowing that those options are there. Why is it important that people need to eat more vegetables? Why is it important that people need to stay hydrated? Why is it important that eating a good diversity of nutrients really helps us in how we feel physically and also perform mentally? Thanks, Maddie. Yes, so this is the sort of feedback. This isn't Coke's score when it comes to Wellbeing Index. This is a mock-up one that we made up ourselves. But in terms of evaluating the effectiveness of a program, so a lot of companies now are really talking to us about how do we see if the changes where the programs we're implementing are creating meaningful change. And you can't manage what you don't measure. So we created our Wellbeing Index a number of years ago, and I guess some of the fundamental key differences between our Wellbeing Index tool compared to a typical engagement survey. The Wellbeing Index tool is focused purely on behaviours of employees. So what are the things that people are doing? Because we know what the behaviours do dedicates what the outcomes are. Too often we just focus on the outcomes. So how stressed are you? I'm really stressed, without actually discovering what are those individual behaviors that are within the control of the individual. So not necessarily looking at that workplace design type of survey, but at an individual level, what are the behaviors that are they doing on a regular basis that are either helping them or hindering them when it comes to their own well-being? So we aggregate that data there. So again, we get an overall well-being score, and hopefully over time we see that increase. But more importantly, we can identify which areas people are struggling with most. So we can see at this particular example, 57% on movement. So again, we might need to be doing a bit more work on movement. And then we break it down into areas that are going really, really well. So we can see, this particular example, 88% of employees make an effort to socially connect outside of the workplace. So again, as I mentioned before, loneliness is at epidemic levels. This workplace is doing some great work. They've got obviously a very social bunch. We don't really need to talk to them from that lens of loneliness and making social connection. But if we do look at, say, something like recovery, is that 47% of employees will work until they're burnt out and won't take steps to prevent this. So again, that's a really great opportunity for us to come in, run some educations, identify maybe the groups within the business that would benefit from this type of information and education. And obviously, working with the organisation to make sure that the work design factors are also being improved across those different areas. But we never give individual data. We don't give data that enables you to identify who the individuals are. It's always aggregated data in a way for you to, again, measure change at an organizational level. And then it also encourages the individual to want to complete these surveys because they can quantify their own well-being. They can help to identify the areas that they need to change in. So there is tangible benefits to the individual, not just me giving data to the workplace, but actually helping me to identify where is my well-being at and what are my areas for improvement at an individual level, and then for you as an organization. So again, we implemented that across Coca-Cola over the course, again, of the years, and constantly evaluate and adjust the program as we go. And obviously we can see their feedback there, that given the wide variety of roles, shift patterns and demands across CCEP, it can be difficult to coordinate any session and have our people willing to utilize their valuable time. So not only did we see that increase in engagement across head office, organization wide, but also within supply chain, where they really value the information that we provide for them in the way that we engage with them. This program has been so successful that last year they won the best health and wellbeing program at the HR Awards as well. Thank you for joining in. Time for any last questions when it comes to how do we adapt these communications across different working contexts. Hopefully I've given you a few things to think about when it comes to, I guess, having that human-centered design, not conducting surveys, interpreting that data for 12 months and then starting to make changes, but trying to do things in real time so that you can help problem solve as we go and continue to innovate. If you do want some more information, if you scan that QR code at the bottom of your screen, that will take you to some white papers that we've developed across these different areas and aspects. We've also got our calendar of events coming out in the next week or so in terms of suggested events across both a head office organisation wide, both globally and locally here in Australia. And then we've got another calendar which is different. And again, that's probably something to point out that, again, the different contexts mean that we have different calendars, but more for those operational site type of businesses. Again, we always tailor and make those unique to each individual. But if you follow that QR code, you can download last year's wellbeing calendar, and it will mean that you'll also receive next year's calendar in the next few weeks. And again, hopefully apply some of those human design thinking processes to your business. Any last questions, Maddie, that are coming through? Key takeaways, actually any key takeaways from people as well from today's session? Again, no time is worth taking of yours unless you're going to implement something off the back of it. Any thoughts around that off the back of today?
We just had one final comment that was saying it is the environment and culture that sets up behaviors. Stress people eat poorly. The research is very strong in this area.
Yeah, look, I'm not disagreeing with you in that both are really impactful. We also know that when we eat poorly, we're more likely to be stressed. So yes, the vagus nerve connects the stomach and the mind together. That when we're eating poorly, our susceptibility to stress is increased, and then when we're stressed, we're more likely to eat poorly as well. So I 100% agree to you. Any organisation that just comes in and implements a program like this without actually addressing those work design factors is going to get very little return on investment from a program that just focuses on human factors. Conversely, focusing all resources on changing the environment without helping those individuals misses out on huge opportunities to make people feel valued, to give people tools and resources that influence not only their own health and well-being, but that of the people around them. So again, I think it's always really important to bear in mind all those factors, but I 100% agree with you.
Absolutely. That was the last of the comments. But thank you for everyone attending today. If you do have any further questions or comments for Greg, or if you want to learn more about his program, please feel free to use the contact information on the screen at the moment. Thank you again for joining today's webinar, and we hope to join you next time.
Thanks,
Bye.
Maddie, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. Bye.